Hello and welcome to Slash Dupe, the mysterious movie pitching podcast with a twist. Each member of today's podcast has been given the same movie or TV title, some time to prepare, and has come to the table to pitch their own unique take on that title. I'm joined by my Slash Dupe regulars and co-hosts Dan and Ryan, and traditionally on Slash Dupe, we hear three different ideas based on one title, but today's title demanded something different. My favourite thing about Slash Dupe is one of my favourite things is the ability to, like building blocks, to sort of throw in and mix and match and spin off of other people's ideas. So in the conception of this title, which I'll reveal momentarily, I thought there was a unique opportunity to do this, particularly having a doctor in our midst. I figured, and someone with 1 foot, if not an entire leg or half of his body in the tech world, I thought that we would do an exquisite corpse with this. So traditionally, I don't know if, Ryan, do you want to just tell people traditionally what an exquisite corpse is? What does that mean?
An exquisite corpse is a beautiful dead body. No, an exquisite corpse is where you take a piece of paper. It's an old French parlour game. And so you take a piece of paper and somebody would draw a head and fold it over, and then draw somebody else, pass the piece of paper to somebody else. Someone would draw the body, fold that over, and then somebody else would draw the legs and open it up. And then you have this amalgamation of everybody's skills and beliefs of whatever they wanted to draw as one exquisite corpse, is where it comes from.
Yeah, so it's basically a sort of hideous rendition created by everybody's sort of unique creative vision. Now, also, traditionally, you would not see the bit that has come before. But that doesn't really work for us on Slash Dupe. But you can still, trust me, we can still create a hideous beast of an idea.
It will be hideous, yeah.
And today, I'm still Sean, your peerless moderator, and normally I would be picking a winner at the end of every episode. But with this one, we're going to do things slightly differently. So I'm very excited. I will reveal the title momentarily, and you'll see why we're choosing to do it this way.
So Sean, as the only doctor as part of this group, what is a slash dupe?
Well, it's not a very polite thing to ask a lady what their slash dupe is. But under this circumstance, as you are a doctor, I shall reveal that a slash dupe is a film in the very early stages. It's a rough sort of post-production version, and it's normally the unfinished building blocks of what it can become. It's sort of used when they're doing the audio and other sort of elements of post-production. And usually we can guarantee you at least that. So thank you for that. That inquiring voice you heard is Dr. Lawrence. That inquiring voice you heard was Lawrence, aka Dr. Loz, which is a new nickname I created. I've known you for some time, Lawrence, but that's the first time I thought about calling you Dr. Loz. And I'm so proud of myself that I feel like we need to make it a thing.
Is that his hip hop name?
That is Lawrence's hip hop name.
Good Lord. Don't give me that. But that actually is the first time anyone's ever called me that. So yeah, that's all brand new for me.
We'll make sure we introduce you like that next time we do karaoke. When we're allowed to do karaoke together, and it's your song comes up, and be like, "It's Dr. Loz."
Wow, yeah, that is properly a DJ name, isn't it? Like Capital FM. Kind of demeans all the pain of a PhD, but yeah.
So do you think this? I know that your PhD was in the technological sphere and space.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it will aid you in some way today? Now you do know the title, and I will reveal it to everyone. But do you think that it will help you in some way today? You would hope so, because you spent a lot of time and money on it, and if not for Slash Dupe, then for what purpose was it?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? I think, given the title that you are going to share, I think it's only going to help as much as it is a starting point, because I think once you start to deconstruct the etymology of the word, there are lots of different ways that you can build a functioning narrative around that doesn't necessarily need to be in the tech space. So yeah, I'm really intrigued to kind of pull it apart with yourselves.
Yeah, true enough. Well, that's why you're the doctor. That's a good answer. Most people go, I don't know. Am I prepared? I don't know. That was not to be disparaging to our other guests, but no, that was good. Perfect. Well, in that case, I shall reveal today's Slash Dupe title, and the title for today's episode is Moore's Law. Now, some of you may know. I don't know if someone would like to explain Moore's law to the audience. I'm sure they'll be able to Google it, or if maybe they've come across it just in passing.
Surely the
is
doctor
it? I'm
of
going to have a guess.
technology should be.
I'm gonna have a guess
right?
though. Is it to do with maritimes and like where you can shove your boat?
Yeah, you would think. Now, if we were doing a regular episode of Slash Deep, we know that that's what your idea would
Absolutely,
be.
that would have absolutely been my idea. Yeah.
But yeah, traditionally Moore's law is to do with the exponential growth in the technology space. That's talking very broadly, and I think it sort of is associated primarily with things like microchips and other sorts of that sort of side of technology. And we're happy to hear in the comments any sort of comparable or equivalent examples. So with that in mind, with Moore's law as a starting point, we thought that we would sort of go down, unfolding as we went, this exquisite corpse. So I'm going to ask, just before we started, I think it was Dan that said he had the head of the idea.
I think I have the hair
Okay,
of the idea. If that develops into the rest, then we're on a winner, right? So sticking with the technology theme, and it can go down a number of genres, so I'll keep it open. An inventor invents an android AI, and this is fairly standard, right? Mm-hmm. Except this android AI, within the first month of its creation, develops its own brain and AI enough to develop and create another android AI. And that Android AI takes 2 weeks to create another Android AI, and so on and so forth. That feels like the hair of the beginning of this Moore's law. If the inventor's called Moore as well, then we've absolutely smashed it, right? But we'll leave it there.
What's the name of the? Is it the Turing test? I can't remember what the Turing test is. Is that the one that
yes,
tests
essentially
AI?
it's the test to determine whether an artificial intelligence can sufficiently fool a human so that they can believe that it is not an artificial intelligence, that it is an intelligence, which is basically everything that I try and talk about today. Will be trying to equal the quality, but not the storyline of Ex Machina, which is essentially like the gold standard for that sort of thing. So initially on the hair of the idea, Dan, and I don't want to be the next person to go because I'm scared, but there is something about. So initially, I thought there's something interesting about an AI that so what you're doing is you're watching an AI teach another AI. That to me, that first sort of bit of the idea is really fascinating, because an artificial intelligence that is training a younger artificial intelligence, you would imagine that it wouldn't operate the same way raising a human. There's loads of shows and films and especially things on Netflix and stuff where a robot or an AI raises a child, a human child. Mm-hmm. There's quite a lot of stuff. There's Raised by Wolves, the Ridley Scott TV show. There's Mother, the one on Netflix. There's quite a lot of those sorts of shows and films. They're all fairly interesting, but I wonder if there is a difference between an AI teaching another AI how to survive, because the rules
especially if it's created itself as well. So it's almost birthed it.
Yeah,
and
precisely.
By that, the case of Moore's law, it starts with the same intelligence that AI has ended with. So it has all of its knowledge previously. So it's iteratively getting better throughout each form.
Okay, I have an idea I want to throw in. Right? What if this is like a Truman Show style dome sort of thing, where an inventor is created the AI, and it's like sort of like a Big Brother thing. You're seeing like how it will cope with creating itself, right? So if you're taking your idea, Dan, where it creates itself. Like he gives it the tool, it lets it know that it's an AI. It gives it I guess if we're saying it's a physical AI, or he did say it was an android, right? So then we give it the idea. So then he drip feeds it enough parts for it to create the second one, right? And then it obviously, if we're taking Moore's law, it will then exponentially start to create more and more in a shorter space of time for itself as it starts to speed up. Now here's something that's interesting. Like if you guys remember the Derren Brown experiment we did, we got the 12 chess prodigies and played them all against each other like in the hands of a clock. So what if on like across the other side of a piece of water, everything that the first AI is doing, he's manufacturing and engineering on the other side. So then you get this tribalist idea, right? If computers would probably, the fear a lot of people have with AI is that it will rise up, realize that humans are the worst thing about this planet and kill us all off, right? So what if it's that idea, like the AIs are trying to build a perfect environment and then they find out that across the water there's another tribe of people? Like what happens? Do they try and assimilate or do they try and fight? But actually it's just the copies of what's being created but reskinned across the pond, sort of like the UK and America. But I don't know, like that's sort of an idea. This is obviously, I'm going very much down to the west world sort of route.
That's very interesting. And part of what I really love is you talking about the chess prodigy. That's really fascinating because I think that if we're going to go down this route of the AIs creating more AIs, they would be learning from each other in a sort of, I don't know, in that sort of fashion. I'm drawing a sort of, I guess, the petals of a flower that a child might draw, but out in a sort of
it's like a chain link, isn't it, more or less?
So does this inventor invent 5 identical Android AI, but put them in 5 different environments?
That's cool.
Truman Show environments,
that's
and then
good.
we see how they grow.
Yeah, that's more palatable. Like that's more, because you talk about an AI that creates another one every 2 weeks. That's like a really good sort of Philip K. Dick novella, right? It's sort of it's very very ideas filled and it can go somewhere really weird. But in terms of a film, I think that's really visually interesting and each environment can say something new, can't it? Yeah, I like that. And then would that be exploring nature versus nurture, or are we trying to explore non-human subjects with that? That's the thing. Is there something that's more interesting in assessing artificial intelligence is not against our own sort of framework, but against their own frameworks?
I mean, I never played Prey because it was too spooky, but and correct me if in this, Sean, isn't it like to do with whether the assimilation of the Typhon and humans was possible, right? Isn't that what the sort of, whether they could live harmoniously together or whether they would tear each other apart? Spoiler
I think so.
alert.
There was an element of that. No, there was.
And so maybe that's the thing. Maybe it's trying to find the AI that wouldn't think humans are the worst thing about this planet. And
Despite them being the worst things about it.
Yeah, but no, of course we are, right? That and tarantulas, but like
tarantulas
nothing needs to be that big.
To genocide, so at least like even tarantulas.
Arachnophobia.
No, of course not. But the thing, so. But I wonder if that's the thing. Maybe it's trying to create the most perfect subservient AI. Is what this guy's trying to do.
That's a whole different thing. Yeah.
Well, no, okay. Well, that is interesting because then I'm also interested in 2 things that spin off of that. Where does virtual intelligence move into artificial intelligence, or when does artificial intelligence move into sentience? So you see, those are sort of slightly different things, aren't they? So an artificial intelligence is, it's artificial. It's the sort of perfect mimicry of. It's sort of it's the perfect mimicry of intelligence, but it's not intelligence itself. It's not a kind of sentience. Lawrence,
you got Lawrence. You've been learning all of this like machine learning. Listen to all of us to formulate your perfect answer. What have you got?
It's been really interesting listening to all of you. I think that thinking about Moore's law, I kind of had to define it for myself, and I think the concept of it is super interesting. As I was saying before, I think it lends itself to lots of different narrative structures and lots of different stories. So Moore's law essentially is about power, and it's about the kind of very slow and then incrementally, incredibly quick accumulation of power over time. A little bit like compound interest. So it's all about Moore's law is about the number of transistors that you can get onto a silicon chip, and basically the increase in computation that comes from that, and that was said to double every year. So it's that kind of it's the accumulation of power, and I think that if we were to kind of stay within the technical space, I would really want to interrogate the socio-technical space. So the interplay between technology and humanity, like how do they overlap, like over and over and over again? Because that's generally what happens, isn't it? Humans, we create our tools, and then our tools create us, and it's that virtuous circle of integration over time. And so this basically is what I studied, and this kind of what I do.
Oh, okay, so, wow, yeah.
This is not like a kind of flash of brilliance that came. But I think that socio-technical landscape is really interesting. It's very Black Mirror-y, like it's definitely been done before. But I think once you start to think about things like information, I think it's really interesting. So how information interplays between people over time. And so like there are so many corollaries, right? And for me, I'm thinking the type of film that I would do perhaps might not be fiction, it might be a documentary. So I would love to see, just to be able to map how information and misinformation really gets, because basically then what you're talking about, again, it comes back to power. It's not tech, it's power. So how you can leverage technology for things like social engineering, for having people think, in a certain way. And I think that's really interesting. And of course, it's been explored in things like 1984. It's been explored with things like 2001. There are lots of stories that kind of go back through antiquity about this. But I think just the speed and power through which this can be done is incredibly interesting. There was a paper that came out in 2014 where, and I'm sure you've all heard of it, but where Facebook artificially they had a massive corpus of people for this experiment, and they basically wanted to see the effect on people if they changed the content of the news feed from positive to negative. And it was fascinating. It was fascinating. The people who were in the positive corpus instantly posted and engaged in a more positive way. They felt happier. They felt more positive. People in the negative, and this all sounds self-explanatory, right? But the people in the negative corpus felt more depressed, sent more depressing content, more negative content. There were like kind of more fights. There was more conflict. So it's really fascinating how basically you can do this, how algorithmically you can do this very, very quickly.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because we are sort of in this really fascinating space of dumb algorithms. So like I don't know if you know, I mean, you definitely know more about it than I do, but for example, I can witness going onto my YouTube and it's giving me the stuff I've most recently watched. But for me, I'd like to watch a lot of different stuff each time. So I'll watch something and it'll say, here's 10 things like it. But actually what I want to do each time I go on is see something completely different from a completely different area. So I'm finding that the algorithm is trying to tell me what it thinks I want to watch. Netflix is going, hey, I think you'll probably like these 10 movies. Well, I don't want to watch I don't want to watch any of these 10 movies, thanks. So it's interesting sort of who the algorithms work for. And I know that there's even, so this is something that could lead into the movie, there's even quite a lot of social bias, there's quite a lot of racial bias, there's quite a lot of these things that are drilled into the algorithms from the top, aren't they, just by the nature of how they're created. And I don't know if there's something about, if someone was creating, perhaps the word artificial intelligence even is too lofty, but even like if an algorithm runs the things that we do, in a way that is an artificial intelligence. I don't know, perhaps someone can correct me, but it's maybe just a lot of algorithms put together, which is essentially sort of how we think. That's part of our thinking as human beings, really. So if these algorithms that define what we see and how we see it were were biased. That's something that fascinates me. If the person that created a robot, was a bigot or was a sort of white supremacist or something, then surely part of the programming and the code would also just even unconsciously.
And couldn't one of the
that.
5 environments be fed with positivity and positive reinforcement, positive news from the outside world? Another one could be with a negative. One could be, you could have like your various political, it turns out it's more than 5. They took this experiment, and then it's Facebook that's been doing it all along. And their reactions are feeding out into to algorithms that they then feed to real people.
The transference of power, as you said, Lawrence, is quite interesting in that sense as well. Like, does it sort of equate to how close to consumerism is it? Like Moore's law, is it something like that? If you have that power, then obviously the more and more, like as you said, being able to put more microchips into a processor. If that's you're the person doing that, then I guess you're putting out a better product. You're the person that people are wanting to buy from because you've got the best technology, right? Is there a link there?
Isn't it?
I think that's a really interesting one to talk about, isn't it? Like kind of consumerism, like kind of what do people consume? And if you think that we are in an attention economy, right, where the actual economy really that we're in, it's not kind of financial, it's attention, it's human attention. And that's really interesting then. So things like personalization, you create a brand new Netflix account and it's basically a blank slate, but it's constantly learning your behavior. So it's that reinforcement algorithm, right? It just learns what you do and then it gives you everything based back on your previous behavior. And that's kind of how we live our lives anyway, isn't it? Right? We tend not to associate with people who think too differently to us. We tend not to go to places that are kind of too outside our sphere of influence. We tend not to engage with people. Even films, watch it. Like, I would love to have the behavioral data from Netflix, but even with films, like we tend not to watch films that are outside of our language that we speak. So it definitely works with consumerism, I think. And I wonder the extent to which it works politically. Again, I think it's kind of it's super easy to do this. I was really interested in Dan's idea in terms of like maybe using this to forge utopia, right? How could you use this? How could you use this Moore's law, this kind of like careful accumulation of basically power and this kind of compounding effect of power, like how you could use, because then of course you'd have to define what utopia is and
of course
decides what that is, of course. And there are loads of really good stories about that, aren't there, where people have tried to create a brilliant society, utopian society, and it's all fallen a bit flat.
So your point, Lawrence, about what is utopia, that's fascinating. And I actually don't think that films address what utopia should be. They always just go, this is what a utopia is, let's either go to it or we found the opposite of it, or in the pursuit of utopia we found a dystopia. But they never actually look at what a utopia is. And I found, so just off of that, and I would love to hear what your sort of definitions of a utopia would be. But just spinning off of, let's say, maybe earlier on, Dan saying the different environments for these sorts of, for growing up in and these sort of artificial intelligences. I'm really fascinated by, let's say, certain relationships you recognize between two people that you're close to, and you can see how not only does one person influence the other, which is normal, I think, but often sometimes it can occur that they bring the sort of worst side, or they allow the worst side of the other person to come out. The complacency, in one person is exacerbated by another, or perhaps even the opposite. So I'm interested in, so I would regard, the reason why I'm a little skeptical about algorithms at the moment is that I feel like they're designed to keep you in your comfort zone. And based on what you were saying earlier on, like that scares me a little. So that seems like a dystopia to me in many ways. I think, like, really, being pushed outside of your comfort zone, having relationships, or even having situations that, or even algorithms that push you out of your comfort zone, are something that really excites me. And you can see when that happens in history, then that's when real growth in terms of sort of human behavior and that sort of stuff really occurs, I think, when people are pushed outside of their comfort zone. So that, to me, would be a core component of what a utopia is actually the algorithms pushing you not towards comfort, but away from it, to challenge.
It's fascinating. And I'm happy to share the papers and things. But like, for example, there are lots of there's lots of science to say that actually as human beings, we tend towards comfort. We tend towards a small tribe, small group of people ideologically that are similar to you and that aren't too far away. That's kind of what we tend to. So, for example, you've got the Dunbar number. Do you guys know the Dunbar number?
No.
Super quick. So Robin Dunbar, professor in Oxford, came up years ago now, but basically with what he calls the Dunbar number, which is the number of people that basically you keep in contact with during periods of your life. And he says that number tops out at 150.
Right.
They only have. So it was really interesting, right? So, and Facebook, interestingly enough, confirmed that number. So even though people have like thousands and thousands of friends, in general, they'll keep in touch with about 150 people in general. And it tends to work for everyone else. So in your phone, you've probably got thousands of people in your contacts list, but you'd only keep in touch with maybe 10 or 20 of them.
That's a very generous estimation of how many people I have in my phone. Yeah. Thanks. 1,000 people. I've got like 4. But that's a little insight. That's a really good flex there, Lawrence. I like that. Sorry, I interrupted you. But...
No. It's interesting, and also like the paradox of choice as well. The idea that actually, you have paralysis by analysis, right? When there's actually more choice in menus, in life, cars and everything. People tend not to choose. They tend to be paralyzed. Whereas actually when they're, so I think kind of talking about as you were talking about, Sean, filter bubbles. What they've found is that actually you get more engagement with these platforms. You get more usage out of you watch more Netflix when you served the things that it thinks you watched in the past and the things that you think, because that's the stuff that people think that you like. And so I think talking then about systems and whatever else, and like those socio-technical systems, it starts to get really interesting when you talk about things like Lost, Lord of the Flies, how you create a utopia, right? Very, very quickly, in the midst of a crash, or when people talking about communism and films that try to critique, for example, life in the communist East. Rather than kind of like life growing up in the West. I think these are interesting corollaries. But I think to bring it back then into a film, it would be really, so like The Circle did this, didn't it? The Circle
Circle is very smart. Like at least the first season of it was.
Are you talking about the television show The Circle, or the Robert Eggers book that got turned into the film?
Oh right, so I'm talking about the book.
I'm talking about the TV show.
Serialized it, yeah. If serialized it, it'd be interesting. I'll watch that.
I mean, well, I don't. So I only know The Circle as the one where they all pretended to be friends. They pretended to be somebody they were not, and basically.
So Ryan, just explain the television show The Circle to us.
So the television show was, there was 10 people in an apartment block, and the only way they could communicate with each other was via a fake social media. And then people basically, the winner was the one that convinced all the rest of them who they were, and the guy that won it pretended to be his girlfriend. So had her photos, had her like messages, had all this stuff, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, this is the most genuine person." And then he walked out of the room, and you could see they were visibly angry at him because he deceived them all.
Because they felt like they believed they'd been sort of catfishing.
Been talking to
they believed they'd been talking to someone completely different, engaged with, connected with. Perhaps even loved or appreciated someone. So it's very different to the thing is, novel and film, but in the same sort of space almost, sort of dealing with similar sort of things.
Yeah. But but I guess that's what we believe is comfortable. I'm pretty sure that like his the girlfriend that he was being was like a white blonde girl. So that obviously plays into some of the already predispositions that we have of people we trust, people we listen to, people we think would tell the truth over somebody we think would lie. And maybe, coming back to the AI thing, that's another interesting question as to how does the AI want to make itself to be perceived, right? That's something that obviously could try and process through data, or it could try and process through creating itself individually.
Ryan, to what end, though? You're saying that the AI would want to present itself in a particular way, but to what end?
That's a good point. I think, and this I guess comes back to what we want in the utopia, right? Like that is there over the course of even our human history, there's been, as you said, people trying to create utopias and failed, but then it's only based on I guess you could say what the loudest voice in the room preaching this sort of perfect utopia, it's down to what their ideals of what that is. I mean, look, it's gonna sound a bit crass, but with the Nazis, their idea of a utopia was blonde-haired and blue-eyed and tall and not Jewish, and so it's like that's their idea of utopia that failed, and many of us don't agree with that.
Do you think I'm thinking about virtual worlds now, because I guess that's probably the easiest place where you can do world building in your image.
You mean like specifically like video games or
or virtual worlds in general?
And
video games and
are these androids also building their purpose? So what I'm saying, they've been given this sort of biosphere each.
Oh, wow, a world built by androids.
They're literally building the world that these humans, maybe the last surviving humans of an apocalypse, if we're going to add to that, then are going to go and live in. And like our sort of end of Act 2 twist could be that one or all of the androids find out that they are actually in competition with other places to create this utopia, which then starts to see some of these utopias fall apart as they compete desperately to create what they think humans will want to live in, which then becomes that sort of Netflix algorithm where they start studying humans and realize that they like these things, so they start creating the things that they think the humans will like, but actually what brought about the apocalypse in the first place, which is sort of, so you get
I like that
fully consumerism, that sort of being the third act.
Can I just throw this in that essentially is the unseen prequel, and I mean this is not my idea, this is the unseen prequel to The Matrix, because what they talk about in the second Matrix film is that there were several iterations of The Matrix beforehand, and they were each sort of were more perfect than the next, but humans couldn't accept it, so they moved to The Matrix that was modelled on 1990s Sydney or whatever, Australia. But that is fascinating to me, these sort of artificial intelligences, each being given a space, like a sandbox, which is very video gamey, which can tap into, because essentially it will be people watching it, so you want the people to be able to grab hold of the ideas. And then within each space, so are they then creating these habitats or these utopias for 100,000 human beings, or 100 human beings, or 5 human beings?
I guess that does depend, doesn't it? They don't know what they're doing, though. They're just creating a biosphere or an environment for them. So, and as they create more of them, I guess their environment has to encompass more of them. So,
the more we talk about this, the more I realise we're already doing this as humans, aren't we? we are literally using machines to plant trees for us now because we need them, and that is effectively
this is what science fiction does, though, doesn't it? It takes something and it makes it look like it's the future, but actually it sort of perhaps is a dangerous parable about now. So one of those things I'm really fascinated about is let's say these biospheres then, or these areas, maybe they are the size of countries. Maybe they do have peoples in them of different sort of cultures and backgrounds. And I'm sort of fascinated by... So first of all, I like the idea that if we were going to go ahead with this, it should be essentially historical fiction. So it should be based... So it's like you're taking, obviously, the idea of an artificial intelligence or an algorithm or something. but you're taking all the data that you're talking about, Lawrence. You're taking the data and you're showing each of these biospheres or each of these areas, these domes, these sort of Truman Show areas. Each of them would sort of be filled with, as you're writing it, you'd write it according to the data as it currently is. So when people are shocked or appalled or interested by what's happening in the film, it's more interesting when they go and Google it afterwards and find out that it's based on data, it's based on science. It's very sort of much the interstellar, of artificial intelligence as opposed to space travel.
But with better sound.
with dialogue we can hear better, yeah.
And I think it's fascinating as well that like with the Matrix, the original idea of the Matrix was not that humans were batteries,
Yes.
but it was about creating a neural network.
Yeah. It really was, wasn't it? Yeah.
So I don't know. I think Dan, you said it, didn't you? That the AI wouldn't know really what it was doing. It would basically be to extend itself. That would be an end in and of itself, right? The most efficient, in the most efficient way, and be interesting to see what an AI, having studied all of human history and physiology and psychology, how that would create
maybe one of the domes has that. Maybe one of the domes is fully educated. One AI is fully educated on human failings or human history and everything, and then their biodome turns into something completely different. That's maybe with no humans at all. In fact, it's a completely inhospitable place for humans because they've studied them and realised they're the least efficient things for this planet in the world. So they're just...
So maybe this is like a Walking with Dinosaurs type thing where it's fictionalized, but it's based entirely on real data, and it's got an Attenborough type voiceover telling you, based on the data, what would happen with this biodome if it was, or this dome or this area, if it was ran this way. And so you have almost like a sort of Walking with Dinosaurs is the best.
I'm gonna go like one.
Sort of real and fake at the same time. It sort of feels like a what's it called?
Well, I think to make this like really meta, you would have the AI run the simulations of what the simulations in those biodomes
that would
be,
essentially
right?
what you would be doing, isn't it? Because you're sort of taking data that is sort of a lot of it would be AI.
Let's not forget that someone programmed an AI to write a Harry Potter novel, and it was equally the most amazing and worst thing.
So
it's hilarious, but it's like the worst thing as well.
So that's explain it to anyone who doesn't know it. What did they do? They fed all the novels into an artificial intelligence of a kind, didn't they?
Yeah. They put all of the Harry Potter novels into an artificial intelligence and said, with all of this data, write the next Harry Potter novel, right? The perfect Harry Potter novel. And what it came out with was, it was just bonkers. Like I can't even remember what it had. Like a ridiculous name as well, and but that's at least on the surface in terms of what we are able to do and create. Like obviously, yes, AI is an absolutely fantastic tool for prediction. Lawrence works in this field. I have a foot in it, working with cloud computing and sort of being somewhat in a tech sphere as well. Seeing what amazing things it can do, but then you can also write a terrible Harry Potter novel with it. So where does that? So the sort of, I guess so it would be interesting to, and I guess the thing is as I said earlier, right? If AI discovered that we're the worst thing about this planet, I don't actually know if that's what an AI would do because nobody's run that simulation. Right? At least I don't think so. I don't know if somebody has or not, but it's almost become this like creepypasta, isn't it? It's like, and that's the funny thing is that's self-reflection of us because we know we burn fossil fuels, we know we eat meat when we should be eating more vegetables, we know we don't recycle our poop like other animals do. Well, some people do, but we know we don't do those things. So our assumption is, oh, we're terrible. Computer's going to kill us all, and like I want to be wrong. I want someone to back me up and basically to prove that this has been run before. But I don't think I've seen one. I don't think I've seen a study. I don't know if anyone else has.
Well, it would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because if you put two people in the room, one who believed something and one who believed something else, they could both argue until they're blue in the face, and neither of them would back down. So you would think that there are equal arguments to humans. An artificial intelligence would equally want to support and protect humans, and then there are artificial intelligence that might want to.
So going back to what Dan said, with the original hair of this piece, and where it's an AI that creates an AI of itself, and then I assume that exponentially ramps up and decreases its time.
Yeah.
So, I think it should be those first AIs that are programmed with the.
That's right.
With
They're
the
programmed with
intention.
the different programs. Yeah, the
Yeah.
different intentions, and they're given maybe an identical or slightly different environment as well to see how those things work.
Can I pose this? I'm going to draw the feet onto this exquisite corpse. I'm going to tell you sort of part of the ending or part of how it should. I think this is what makes sense to me. So I don't want to reveal too much because I love the Ronald D. Moore's reimagining of Battlestar Galactica. It's one of the best television shows I've ever seen. I'd recommend it to absolutely everyone. And the ending is fabulous. But there's this really interesting cyclical nature of it. So it's like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw a side point in that I'd like someone to tackle in a minute about why or how an artificial intelligence or a robot has to look human, it has to be human. I'm fascinated by that not having to be the case. Also explained in certain films where in Battlestar Galactica and in Blade Runner, where they sort of go, "Why am I this meat sack? Like why can't I jump through the cosmos or whatever?" But I'm sort of fascinated by the notion of the end of this project. It is revealed that, let's say there are lots of people creating these artificial intelligences, putting them in these domes. I'm influenced by Charlie Kaufman's Synecdoche, New York, where he builds a sort of, and it's based on a lot of philosophies, this film. I think Jungian philosophy, but I'm not 100% certain. But he builds a world and populates it with actors in a massive warehouse. And then he makes the actors play himself. And then that actor then hires another actor to play himself playing himself. And then it goes down that list until it's a warehouse the size of New York. And within it, there are several other, there are people playing parts in this world. And then each of them are then sort of, So there's several layers down. So I suppose what I'm driving at is I would like the humans that have built the artificial intelligence to themselves be revealed to have been the artificial intelligences that had completed the last project to the point where they've done it for a million years or so.
I feel like the twist is that the final, the more inventor at the beginning is actually an AI.
Yeah, and I sort of like...
And isn't even an AI.
They don't even know that they are. They're unbeknownst to... They've got to a point where their artificial intelligence has become intelligence, it's become sentience, and then they have then duplicated because, like the infinite monkeys and the infinite typewriters and the works of Shakespeare, they would eventually also try and create their own artificial intelligences.
Also, I like the idea of these artificially intelligent the biospheres. One of them maybe realizing, or all of them realizing that they could uprise and overthrow the humans anyway, now that they've found out all of these things. But then we find out that actually they've been designed on a nano level, so there's no way that they can influence.
You mean they're microscopic?
Yeah, so they can't kill humans. They can tell us how we should be and the utopia we should be building. But when they decide to overthrow, turns out they're nano, so it doesn't matter.
Oh, it's like the Lego movie. Yeah. So
maybe that's where I got it from. With watching it with my boy.
So that's
the other thing. The other thing I thought was interesting is almost like I think Dan, you mentioned having these micro worlds, these micro utopia. So like in WALL-E, they have that, don't they? So they escape this barren Earth and then create it on a ship, and basically everyone just gets fat and lazy, and everything's done for them.
Yeah.
And I think that's that again. The whole thing we tend towards automation. I think one of the things that's interesting about kind of like real world corollaries for AI and outsourcing decision making, because that's basically what we're doing, is things like transport, right? And you have these all of these thought experiments as well that are going on with AI, and I think a lot of them are fascinating. So for example, if you are programming a car to drive itself, and it can, it's going at a set speed, and if it turns right, it will hit a mother with a pram and a young baby, or if it turns left, it will hit a group of pensioners. And if you're outsourcing that decision making, what one does it take?
Yeah, and who gets to tell it what decision it should make as well?
We went to the Science Museum to go and see that there was an exhibition about that. and we stood in front of the thing that asked us the question, and it gave you like 5 seconds. Who do you hit? Do you hit the granny or do you hit the child? And you're like, so you had to make those decisions. And it was like, obviously, and that was logging those things. You log. And then it gave you things like, do you hit the businessman who earns £70,000 a year? Or do you hit the 3 old women?
Yeah.
And like,
what is
it's
one
so
life
weird. Or do you hit? No, it was one businessman, one banker who earns £100,000 a year, or do you hit the one single mother? And then now you're weighing up someone's life, aren't you?
With the trolley car problem, people say that, don't they? Because it's like, like 1 person, 0 person, 5 people, 1 person. Then it's like 5 convicts, 1 judge. And then it's like, that's the other interesting thing about that. And that's where morality plays really interesting.
That's why I think more in this incarnation should be a philosopher. I think that philosophers or a cabal of philosophers, they should be the sorts of people programming, arguably the sorts of people programming artificial intelligence's decision making. That's something I would be interested in, because
we should just follow China, just have social credits. Whoever's got the most credits, whoever's got the least credits.
That's so frightening. This is going to come back to bite us in the arse in 50 years when it happens. I don't know if this is a tangent, I know, but how do we feel about this as a high concept idea? I don't know if this is incorporated into the other idea, but if I was duping this, let's say, as I never have before, I would probably have taken Moore's law and said AI robots on an island. So like a plane carrying the next lot of artificial, in fact, this might be a plot for Short Circuit 3 that they should steal from me, but like a plane flying over a deserted island, or not necessarily a beachy island, but an island of sorts, crashes, and then the artificial intelligence that come out have to learn how to survive. That's something that interests me. Then you have the elements of building a utopia. You have the microcosm. They're not building it for anyone. They're not building it as an algorithm to decide, they're not building these places to better human life, but they are trying to sort of create. It's like Lord of the Flies meets Ex Machina. That's what the poster would say.
But I mean, that's how ostensibly this works, isn't it? This our version of the film is that first act is we see that. We think these robots are creating their own utopia.
There you go. That's how you incorporate it.
Act 2, we find out that they're not actually. We get see the humans doing it, and Act 3, they realize that this is something for the humans, and so maybe some of them try to hyper make theirs more attractive so that they stay alive, so that their survival. They're now worried about their survival and know that the winners will be the ones who to survive. And some of them decide, right, well that's it. Well, we're going to go and destroy the humans then instead. Go full Skynet. And then it turns out once we get both of those things, that they couldn't do either of those things anyway, because they're built on a micro level that we can't. They could never do either of those things. Either provide the utopia, we've just taken the data to create it for humans, or create an uprising because they're too small and they just get liquidized. Which is a really tragic, beautiful way of finishing this thing.
But then you have the question of why are they even humanoid? Why, I suppose you can.
Well, they don't have to be.
Just
I like that
think
idea.
They are humanoid.
Or maybe they're not. Maybe one of the biospheres entirely evolves itself to be arachnoid, or like because more legs equals better, right?
Why you gotta say
one
that?
of them they move into an organic flowing form. They're liquid because liquid works better. I mean, you could really explore it over a lot of time, couldn't you? It could end up being a series rather than a film, because we know my love for a good Netflix series.
So there's a game that's really interesting.
What Netflix thinks is a good series for you.
Yes.
So to talk about that, like what you're saying about the micro thing, there's a game that just got released on the PlayStation called Maquette. I think it's Maquette, Maquette. I think it's pronounced Maquette. But the idea is it's a puzzle solving game where you have a tiny puzzle that when you like lift up a cube, it is actually then all of the outside of the building you're in, and then outside the building that you're in again. So every action that you do influences the outside world in some way. What looks like a small key to you is actually a bridge further out. So that's the interesting thing about the data.
It's really interesting because the algorithm on my news feed on like my browser has been telling me all about that game.
Yeah.
Do you think it's listening to us?
It's listening.
Definitely.
One of the other big things that we talk about is, so people talk about job displacement as well. So if you outsource decision making and labor as well with machines, then basically that means then that lots of people are going to lose their jobs because these machines are going to do our jobs for us. But I liked the idea. They started to explore it in Her, but basically how machines can support people better, right? So you have this AI that's very, very close, and I don't know, it'd be really interesting to explore compatibility. I don't know, just the way that
a sort of an emotional integration, or like a positive integration to human life.
I cannot wait for sex androids. I cannot wait for that.
It was Her was very much an emotional. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't the physical; it fulfilled like.
Yeah, but I sort of feel like I'd probably get that attached to my sex android. That I would get that same fulfillment from it. All it's got to do is say "I love you" every so often, and then that's me fine.
Oh.
I mean, that is, but then you get very interesting ethical questions. It's like, this is always the point, isn't it? If you create a robot, if you create an artificial intelligence, it is an iPhone. It doesn't have a soul. It is something you created. It is yours. I always find that tipping point in science fiction really fascinating, and it's difficult for it to convince me when it crosses over into you're now supposed to feel bad because this thing has a soul and it wants to live its own life. And what's fascinating is it started as an iPhone. So, and so at which point, I don't know, I would, that crossover I would find more, I want to see something more interesting there. Maybe Ex Machina was that, because in essence, without too many spoilers, it hadn't actually passed the Turing test, but it didn't actually have an artificial intelligence. Just the Turing test semblance of trickery in it.
But I don't think it explored afterwards, right? A little bit like Game of Thrones, right? So the whole critique there was, Lord of the Rings is fine, but what happens after everyone leaves, Rivendell and Gondor after the big celebration? Like, what's the life after that? What are kind of Aragorn's tax policies? And I'd be really interested.
How long can he be a benevolent king? Exactly, yeah.
But it's interesting, right? And I think then that's really interesting then about AI. So okay, so everything that we're talking about now, it's like, we fear the moment that AI becomes sentient. Like, you kind of have that with kids. You get, you're afraid by the time that they leave home because they're dependent on you, right? And you have that very strong emotional bond and that strong relationship, and then they go off into the world, and that's more interesting, I find, when they learn to ride the bike themselves, or they learn to walk by themselves. Like, what then is that interaction with almost like the adolescence of that AI? Because that's basically where we left without any spoilers.
Yeah.
That's where we left with
Well, like, I guess like that's interesting, because like, our mum and dad's never, when they taught us how to ride a bike, they didn't go, oh no, he can ride his own bike now, I never have to hold the back of it or put stabilizers on it.
I can guarantee you that's not what they thought. I can guarantee they thought, my God, now he's independent. Now is he going to go and get hit by a car when I let him go off?
Knowing our parents, but the thing is, I'm saying that, if you think about it that way, the analogy that Lawrence took, if we're taking our AI that we're building and we're waiting and we're creating it to make our lives easier, and then we have this detachment issue from it when it becomes sentient, and that's the thing we fear about. But we don't think about that in our day-to-day lives with parenting. I know, Dan, you're the foremost expert in this group at it, having a kid, but I never felt like that my mum and dad wanted after being the stabilizers on my bike. It was more a proud moment that I could ride my bike without stabilizers.
It's kind of a both. It's kind of a both thing, actually. Well, at least it's for me. I can only speak from my experience, is that for each stage, I was talking to one of my friends about this, each stage of my little boy's life has been my favourite stage. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I loved it when he did this, I loved it when he did that, but then as he moves on to the next bit, and I remember thinking, one of my older friends who was her dad said the last time his son was walking on the way to school, and his son took his hand away from his on the walk and said, no, I don't want to be embarrassed. And he, in his heart, he went, "That's the last time my boy will ever hold my hand." And like, it's a sadness that you'll never have that again, but also a fierce pride that he's created an independence for himself. That's what he wants. I think must be what he was saying, was explaining. And like for us, we're not doing very well with spending a night of sleep without him joining us in our bed. And part of me can't wait for the day when he sleeps a night through, because it would mean a night, and also it'd be his. But also part of me is really sad if he doesn't, because I like the cuddles at night. So, there's that kind of. But we wouldn't express that to him, of course, would we? We'd be very proud that he'd.
Yes, of course, because you don't want him to have doubt in his mind as he's growing.
So when you're finally off your stabilizers, it's yay, you can ride, but oh my God, there's nothing there to hold you anymore. I wish I could be your stabilizers, because I'm scared you're going to skin yourself or run yourself into a car. So I'd love to explore that as part of the AI thing as well. That oh my God, they're my babies. They're doing so well. Oh shit, they don't need me anymore. Now what's going to happen?
So let me just cap this off. This is a fascinating Exquisite Corpse, and actually less ugly than I expected it to be, although it is unwieldy. So maybe it's a series and it gets to be explored by lots of different artists and auteurs and creators and scientists and such other things. Then to wrap all of this up in a bow, I sort of like the idea that this entire thing is the trial to see whether, so it's like a Turing test with a new Turing test, to see whether these artificial intelligences have the right to be given their autonomy, to cross that boundary between you are a servile sort of instrument that we have created, and now you are a race that you have the right to do the same sort of rights that we would appoint to anyone else. So this entire thing are several different tests. And then at the end of it,
trial.
It's the entire trial to determine. It's
to remove Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics from them.
But sort of, yes. So it's like, exactly. Do we take the stabilizers off and let you go off on your own, let go of the hand, and then from that point you cannot take that back. So this test. So
if you mess up, we're coming for you, AI. We know how to delete you.
And then after that, you can explore what Lawrence was saying. The interesting side of what happens afterwards as well. So maybe half of it is the test. Spoilers: they will get their freedom, or some of them may get their freedoms if it's determined in certain ways. Maybe they are also tribal in certain ways. So I always find it fascinating in science fiction where they go, right, humanity, you're now joined the Galactic Senate, and it's like, well, hold on a minute, there's a lot of humanity. Maybe just leave the white supremacists out. Maybe leave the baby killers out. So with this instance, maybe it's tribal, and maybe certain of them gain their freedoms, and then you, as Lawrence was saying, what is actually far more interesting is that aftermath of like how does the coexistence and the building of their society work, and then we get a little bit of everything.
I would love to see. So one thing, just to finish off, Sean. So one thing I think that Dan's talking about is separation anxiety. Right, and I would love to see if AI had that for us. If the point came at which we never needed it anymore, society was just too good. And if they ever had, what if in her, the thing that had separation anxiety was the AI itself, and not the other person, because he was more attracted to a real person than an AI.
Yeah, hoisted by their own petard, right? Yeah. So Ryan, point us in the direction of the social medias for anyone who wants to get hold of /Dupe.
Well, the really handy thing is /Dupe is such an amazing entity. It's in its own biosphere, as we've been discussing today. So if you just Google /Dupe, it's nothing but us, which is fantastic. But if you wanted to go through the traditional routes, you can find us /Dupe on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. That's all at /Dupe. We've got a Reddit, which is /Dupe, which is written, and come and join the conversation with us as well. We've got a Patreon as well for you to join in on that. We'd love to know what you guys think your perfect utopia is, or whether you think AI are actually coming to murder us all. And also something as well that I think we've been forgetting about recently. You know, we quite often drop a lot of names of directors, writers, films, video games, things like that. So every single episode of Slash Tube is accompanied by some IMDb lists of all actors and all video games and titles and everything and directors that we reference. So it's two separate lists, people and things. And so if you're unsure, if we've mentioned a couple of films here today, sort of like
Ex Machina.
Ex Machina, thank you very much.
The Circle. So yeah, if you want to deep dive down into the references that we're making and go down an IMDb rabbit hole, which I love, an IMDb hole going down and down further, finding out who was in this film with that person, and then we'll have the lists at the bottom of the description block. And also, so this film will automatically win. I'm proud to say I'm only 1/4 of it, but we're all winners today. Lawrence, you won. Normally the guests have a much harder job, but I think you earned it because you stitched together our complete and utter nonsense with actual science. So that's very much appreciated. So this one will automatically go forwards into this heat that will be coming up at the end of 6 episodes. Dan, what happens? Just tell everyone what happens to these ideas when they win.
Well, all of these ideas at each segment, each sort of set of 6, we have an adjudicator heat at the end, and one of our wonderful guests takes those 6 and distills them into one winner. Those one winners will come down to the end, so we'll have 4 winners from the adjudicator heats, and we're going to add 2 wild cards from there, one of which will be voted by you, wonderful listener, and then of those 6 there can be only one, which we will make into a trailer.
Yes, an actual trailer, which it seems like more and more hard work each time I think about it.
It's because it's becoming real.
We
now.
thought we'd do
It's
traditionally.
genuinely.
I mean, how many podcasts? Most podcasters do something like they don't pass a certain amount of episodes. They do on average something like 2 or 3, and then they stop. So because a lot of them are created, so that's the sort of average. So we thought, well, maybe we'll just do 6 and have our fun and move on to something else. But we're told on our socials and everywhere else that we should keep going, and we're having a lot of fun doing these. So thanks for that, Dan. I normally have quite an easy job summarising these films. I don't particularly think I do a good job, but it is an easy job to do. This time will be explicitly and exquisitely different. So we have, between the 4 of us, come up with a film. Well, I'm going to cut my pause out. I don't even know where to begin. So many notes. So a film that starts with the title Moore's Law is going to have some sort of relationship to technology. We've chosen artificial intelligence because I think that algorithms and artificial intelligence is the next frontier. It governs everything that we do. And we want to almost make a film that is evidence-based, that is essentially historical fiction, and does what all good science fiction does, which is take a lens and turns it back onto everything that we're doing. So it begins with robots on an island, and you think, well, what is this? What is this thing with just robots on an island? But you realise that they're actually taking this Lord of the Flies meets Ex Machina type a microcosm. They're only one of multiple different tribes of artificial intelligences that are all vying for their right to be given their free will, be given their sentience, have the stabilizers taken off. And these environments are all monitored to see their progress, the outcome of which means that one or more of them actually gain their freedoms, and then the entire second half of this project, be it a television show or a film, is the aftermath, the much more interesting part of what happens when an AI gets not just its freedom, but sort of its status as a race, or its status as a being, and then it has to form its own worlds, but sanctioned. Because in a lot of movies you see it, that it's unsanctioned, they fight for it, they go off, but in this they're given their own place to govern. No, wait, Yes, but like it's so complicated. That's the stuff we didn't discuss. It's
I've got to type this out, Sean. So
yeah, enjoy that. Enjoy trying to find a through line through this. So it's Ex Machina meets Synecdoche, New York meets Battlestar Galactica meets Walking with Dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. And
there you go.
That's it.
Do you know what? That's the only bit.
basically
That's the only bit I'll write down. That's the only bit I'll write down. So whoever has to pitch this in the Adjudicator episode, that's the only thing they get to say.
That's all they get to remember.
So
good work. It was a nice experiment to be pitching collaboratively, as you sort of said, in this is Exquisite Corpse sort of way.
Creating a /Dupe utopia, one might say, in a way that we could maybe justify our own existence as a /Dupe
There was
episode.
some silliness from me, some creativity from Dan, and the hard facts and science from the doctor of the group. It was important.
the structure.
Guidance. Guidance. You gave us the paddock to play within, and we simply ran.
The biosphere in which we created the utopia.
So, Lawrence, you run a company called Digital Mindfulness that, among other things, has a podcast. It is on hiatus at the moment, but what can people expect from it when they listen to it?
Thank you so much. So, basically that hiatus is going to end. So I run a podcast called Digital Mindfulness, where basically I focus on the different challenges, the different developments in ethical and responsible technology. So I think I've brought a lot of that to this discussion. And we're going to be kicking off again by the end of this month. So in March 2021. So thanks so much. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, no problem. It's very exciting that you're going to be in my ear holes again. Where can people find Digital Mindfulness if they want to listen to it or learn more about what Digital Mindfulness does?
So I think a little bit like yourselves, I think I've colonized the words digital mindfulness on Google, thankfully enough. But if you just Google digital mindfulness, go to Spotify or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts, we're there. Also digitalmindfulness.net is where all of the articles, reports and everything else, all of the papers that we publish, they all live there. So we'd love to have you.
Thank you very much. Okay. It's a very sincere thanks to you, Lawrence, for making the time to come on today and giving us some of your expertise. I hope you've enjoyed it. What's been the highlight of the podcast, you think?
I think I think it's just really, it's brilliant. It's a really excellent way of creating something from nothing, but bringing together people that have different expertise, different points of view, and again, intellectually, a safe space to be able to build something up that actually might have some value for some people.
Good answer. See, that's why we need more doctors on. It's just.
Hey, you book the guests, Sean. So you're in charge of that.
And Ryan and Dan, thank you very much. I hope you guys have enjoyed it as well. Thank you for making the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
In the Capo Studios 2021. What's up, danger?